As we talked about a few moments ago, the big story, of course, this week, if you were hiding under a rock or maybe, I don't know, had no internet, had no power, or wherever you are, Pat Fitzgerald out in one of the biggest scandals to hit Northwestern athletics maybe ever. And the two guys that really broke the story, we're really proud of these guys as student journalists at Northwestern. And I know that their mentor is proud of what they've done as well. Bradley Locker, he is the co-editor-in-chief of Inside NU. David Gold, managing editor of Inside NU, and they both join us right here live on the show. Guys, great to have you here. Congrats on your great work. Let's just jump right in here. Bradley, let's start with you, or I guess, David, let's start with you, because actually I think you were the one writing this first. Where does this start for you? We heard about Fitzgerald, 2-week suspension. And then what was the straw that broke the camel's back for you, and where this all began in your great reporting?
So on Friday morning around 9 a.m, I received I don't remember if I saw on Twitter from one of our, I think Adam Rimberg was the first one I saw on Twitter, that Northwestern had released their hazing investigation report and Pat Fitzgerald had been suspended 2 weeks. So myself, this summer, it's the middle of July. Normally the summer is pretty dead for us. I'm working on the day camp as a camp counselor, and I had 6-year-olds with fishing rods in their hands. So I'm trying to do that. And as I go on to now Northwestern, I see that they have released an executive summary of the report and say that there has been evidence corroborated in this investigation that the whistleblower who came forward in November of 2022, we found out in January of 2023, but that there was evidence of hazing inside the football program. However, they could not prove that a single coach or player was involved, and that Pat Fitzgerald did not know, but the hazing conduct could easily been discoverable and reportable. So that right away sparked something in me saying, so there was hazing, but no player or coach could be individually named, and Fitz didn't know, but easily could have. And that's where a lot of it came for me recently, going, something's not right here. So that was the original of it. Michael Schill, president of Northwestern, suspended Pat Fitzgerald 2 weeks without pay, effective immediately. But it's really important to know that that was during the NCAA dead period. So no recruiting visits, no contact with recruits, no practices. So Pat Fitzgerald got a 2-week unpaid vacation. Was supposed to run out Friday before Big Ten Media Day week. So Fitz would have been back to his normal duties without really any significant punishment. And that's when I think everything kind of turned, when the whistleblower contacted the Daily Northwestern on Friday night, and they released their huge piece on Saturday.
So as you kind of worked through this, how stunned were you, as you guys, and whichever one of you, either one of you can take this, but how stunned were you when you heard these allegations and start getting details of what was going on?
For me, I was very stunned. I mean, I grew up a Northwestern football fan, and Fitzgerald really had as clean as it's of a resume, at least as it seemed, as one could have in the sport. And a lot of the former players that I talked to were, I think, very surprised for that exact reason, that they could have never even fathomed that Fitzgerald could have been associated with something like this. There had never been any reports of any scandals at all at Northwestern in his 17-year tenure until kind of everything started pouring out all at once. And again, as David mentioned, it really catalyzed by the Daily Northwestern report. And from there, I believe multiple former staffers confirmed that those graphic, severe, coercive acts of hazing occurred. I talked to a very recent former player who said that those accounts were 100% true. And he believed that the assistant coaches were aware, that Fitzgerald was aware. And as he said, everybody else knew this was a widespread issue at Northwestern. And again, I think as more details started to emerge, it became pretty evident to me that this very much did occur. And not only was it a recent phenomenon, but very much an institutional one. I think that's why we saw Northwestern make the decision it did in firing Fitzgerald.
And just to follow up, Bradley, really great reporting, had someone come forward and tell him that one of the main hazing things, the car wash, was going on as early as 2007. Pat Fitzgerald.
Yeah, actually earlier. The player graduated in 2007, so presumably earlier than 2007.
That sounds like even before Pat Fitzgerald became head coach at Northwestern University. So it would have been very hard for Pat Fitzgerald to not know anything for his 17-year tenure as head coach. And I think while plausible deniability sounded likely, that Fitz was, I don't want to know, don't tell me. For someone who, and every college football head coach is in charge of their program completely. They control down to the minute what is going on for all their players. So for a head coach who's there for 17 years to know nothing seemed far-fetched to me.
So what process did you guys, what kind of conversations did you have when you were talking about, okay, we're going to go with this story? What runs through a journalist's mind when you have something like this that is revelatory and explosive at the same time?
I think for me, it all started with just touching base with our staff at Inside and You, which we have an amazing staff, and none of the reporting or even opinion pieces we put out would have been possible without all of their efforts over the last 5 days. But I think I immediately was definitely intrigued and, of course, alarmed by what I was reading, and wanted to see if there was anybody I could get in contact with who could speak to this situation one way or another. And I should say, again, there are a lot of former players I talked to who said they didn't see any hazing at all, that Fitzgerald, again, would not have allowed something like this to happen. But of course, that certainly seems like a moot point when you have others who are saying that this definitely did occur. And it's noteworthy that in President Schill's updated message to the community, when he said that Fitzgerald was fired, that 11 players did confirm that hazing occurred. So it's not as if this was just one whistleblower who was supposedly out to get Fitzgerald, which has kind of been, I wouldn't say a conspiracy theory, but has been one theory among those who are very much in favor of Fitzgerald. And I do not think that is the case.
And for me, I mean, right away, I think we're all glued to our phones the entire weekend, between phone calls, text messages in our editorial board. Our group chat was crazy all weekend. On the phone, whatever we needed, it was an all hands on deck thing. I was bringing a computer to work. Like, we were just doing whatever we could to help out, because I don't know if Brad felt this, every hour something new was coming out.
It was every minute, I would say, literally sometimes minute by minute, new news would break. It was truly one of the most, I really would say, like, incomprehensible and ever-changing stories I've ever seen.
The one I want to highlight the most was Monday. I got a call from Bradley, probably around noon-ish Eastern. He's like, I just talked to this former player who confirmed everything. I'm going to run it. Okay. About maybe 10 minutes later, we got a message from our other editor-in-chief, Iggy Dowling, who said, I got something, a player with racist accusations, and we're going to run it. So within like 10 minutes, we had two massive news stories ready to go. And it was just one after the other, until what I would say 6 p.m. Eastern on Monday night, when I believe Matt Fortuna was the first to announce that Pat Fitzgerald was no longer being retained by Northwestern University.
Talking with Bradley Locker and David Gold of the Inside NU staff about the Pat Fitzgerald firing and the scandal. That it is what it is. It is not going anywhere anytime soon. I think we all could agree with that. Quick question. You guys are you undergrads? Are you rising seniors?
Yes, undergrads.
Okay.
We are both rising juniors.
Right. Rising juniors. Okay. Which is even more impressive. You guys are at the very beginning of your journalism career and having a start to a career that almost nobody has, by the way. I'm curious for you, because you are so early in your careers. I know when you get a hold of a story, personally, I'm thinking like the Michael Vick scandal back in 2007, how once it starts, you're just consumed, like something, this sixth sense kind of kicks in and the adrenaline goes. What was that like for you? You mentioned it, David, a moment ago about like you said, all of a sudden, like bang, bang, this person has this story, this person has this. What is that adrenaline like for the two of you so early in your careers? And I would think probably the first time you've experienced certainly something on this level, but even I think even that that adrenaline drug, that drive motivated you guys for this big story.
Well, I can always make the joke that Bradley and I are always awake. I think the amount of 4 a.m. text between the two of us is very high, but I actually think nobody on our editorial staff slept for 96 hours. I think everyone was awake. I think at one point I slept 2 hours before, like, I wrote a story and then had to go to work, and everyone else was writing in our group chat about the baseball story we were going to break during this time, which was a phenomenal piece of reporting by our former editor-in-chief, Gavin Dorsey, if no one else has taken a look at that. Northwestern Athletics has a lot going on right now that they need to clean up. But I just think once you're in it, you are just ready to go. And for all of us who have covered this program, and we're students, like a lot of us are Northwestern football fans. Like we want to see our school and our soon to be alma mater succeed. That was the hardest part for us, is like, it's a lot of kids who grew up looking up to Pat Fitzgerald, liking Northwestern football, and to see this, how it went down, it was, I think, tough on all of us.
Yeah, I would definitely second everything David said. And speaking, Larry, to your point about kind of the journalism kickstarting in me, I feel like as soon as I read about this, I started thinking of all the former players I could who potentially speak about this. And I'm very grateful to those who were courageous enough to share their story with me. But I think really throughout the last 5 days, I've just tried to think to myself, what is an additional angle that I can take? What is another person I can reach out to try to get some information on this? And I don't think it's been a unilateral effort. I think it's been really tremendous reporting by all of the parties involved, whether it's ESPN, the Daily Northwestern, Inside NU, any site. But I think it's been kind of a collective sense of the truth needs to get out here from Northwestern. And certainly a whirlwind would be an underwhelming description. I feel like, again, I can't go more than 10 minutes without checking my phone, being worried that some other news is going to break. And the situation is far from over, too, we should say.
Yeah, I would say the one thing, Bradley and I did actually get to sit down and play Madden last night together for an hour, and both of us.
Yeah, luckily nothing happened during that 2 hours, but we're lucky, I think.
The collective sigh of just, oh my God, can we have an hour, was very known between both of us.
Yeah. Be a normal college student for a couple hours anyway. You have it's interesting. I will say, when you get older, I'm in the no sleep brigade too. Most of this crew is, but when you get older, it's much harder. So try and get some sleep when you get older, because it's not as much fun to be tired all the time.
Because Brad was this excited when he described to us covering the Gettysburg Address. He was very similar to what
it only lasted for like 2 minutes, so it was quick.
And then Brad had to go to his smoke signal, and then we had to look for it. It was crazy.
So thanks, Mike. But anyway, you as you kind of go through this, and you guys have this, where does Northwestern football kind of go from here? Here's my thing. You keep all of those assistant coaches, basically. It's just Fitz, basically, he fell on the sword, but these guys knew. So it almost comes to the point where you're going to have to clean house. And Ed Orgeron is probably not the guy. I know Eddie O wants it, but I don't think it's going to be Ed. But how do you guys, what do you think's going to happen now with this program?
Well, I mean, I think you touched on a really important point, which is Northwestern's decision to keep all of its assistant staffers. And I think that was somewhat surprising for me. I mean, on one hand, of course, a lot of those staffers probably wanted to just stay on for the season. There wasn't enough time to leave and get another job. But on the other hand, as you said, you can't rule out that these coaches were complicit in what happened and the culture that Northwestern and Fitzgerald created. And again, one player I talked to that everybody in that program knew what was happening, and the university simply did not have enough time to review its findings and conclusively prove that these coaches did not know. And the same goes for the players who were involved too. I mean, punishment for the players could very much be down the line something that happens. But in terms of what's Northwestern going to do in terms of its head coaching position, I feel pretty strongly they should bring in an outside guy. I wrote a column about that on InsideNU.com, which I'm sure your listeners could tune in for, but practically it would be a little tough. I mean, there's a little over 50 days until the season starts on September 3rd. I think a veteran guy, not necessarily Ogeron, even though I had heard that he is interested in the job. It could be like a guy like Paul Chris or David Shaw, somebody that Northwestern already knows they can generally trust to build a safe and sound program, could be an option. But most reports are signaling the Wildcats will use an interim tag on a current assistant, and it probably will be David Braun, who was only hired in January. He's never been a Power 5 coach at any point in his career. And he is in line right now, it seems, to just suddenly vault to be the head coach at Northwestern.
Yeah, I think. Sorry, go ahead, Mike.
No, go right ahead.
I think that it's just I wasn't surprised with all the assistants staying on. There's just not enough time left. If Northwestern, the administration made the decision that they were not going to suspend football operations and they were going to play, you had no choice. There was not enough time to bring in a new coaching staff and all that stuff to get a team even remotely ready to play Rutgers on September 3rd, let alone be anything more than a shell of a football team.
Did they consider at any point in time not having a football season, considering that much of their staff could literally be subpoenaed in the middle of the season, and you're going to have players leaving, and from a health and safety standpoint, lining up against Iowa's defense or Illinois' defense with a bunch of freshmen who are coming in and very thin numbers. Was there ever a consideration that you guys have heard about that they thought maybe this is good, we're going to take a pass on the 2023 football season?
I have not heard that, and I think all indications from the start were that Northwestern is fully intended to play a season this year. But I think that's an important point you touched on, the fact that the 30-day transfer portal window for these players that were at Northwestern is still very much open. I mean, it only opened Monday, and it sounds like a lot of players are still mulling their decisions whether they want to stay or leave. But I know for a good number of the players, a lot of the reason why they came to Northwestern is Fitzgerald himself. Even guys like transfers that were pretty high profile, like AJ Henning tweeted a frowny face when the news came out. And you'd have to wonder if somebody like Henning would consider transferring to another program in light of this. So there's definitely a chance that Northwestern could see a mass exodus of players, and only time will tell how many players decide to leave.
I still think that we're just too close to the beginning of the season for any major changes to come, because if these guys want to play football this year, they're going to play for Northwestern. There's just not enough time for most players to be matriculated into a new university in time to actually play in 2023. My indications and the people I've spoken to, Northwestern was going to play football this year. There's too much Big Ten. There's too much media money on the line.
Yep.
That's the truth. There's too much media money, especially with the new TV contracts kicking in this year. There's not a chance that Northwestern was going to pass up on a lot of cash that funds a multitude of programs for the university.
And that would be a huge hit. You're exactly right. Talking with Bradley Locker and David Gold of the staff inside NU. A quick timeout right here in the show. Stay with us. We'll continue the conversation with these two outstanding young men right after this. Keep it here. Right back here on the show, Larry Smith, Brad Sturdy, Mike Cagley, joined by Bradley Locker and David Gold, two outstanding young journalists from the Inside NU staff. InsideNU.com is where you can read about just the breaking news that they led, as they have mentioned before, giving credit again that, anytime in the media, you might read one person's stuff or TV, radio, watch or hear. But there are a lot of other people that have done just fantastic work, and they've already given credit to the rest of their team as well. David mentioned a moment ago the other scandal that nobody's talking about yet that is just as large, and that's with the Northwestern baseball team. Boy, like you said, it's the Fitzgerald scandal alone, will fill your time. But baseball also, for those who have been paying attention, tell us what's going on with the baseball program, how, if it hadn't been for Fitzgerald, this would also be front page news.
Yeah, so baseball coach, head coach Jim Foster, who first year in Northwestern after winning 4 titles, Patriot League titles at Army, had a culture that was only described to us as toxic, and half the team ended up in therapy because of Foster's style and antics this year. Right now, Northwestern has 16 players in the transfer portal, 10 graduated. Northwestern does not have enough players right now on its roster to field a baseball team in 2024.
I don't even know what to say to that. I mean, like 16 players in the portal in baseball is like, that's insane. So I got to ask, what are the therapy and things like this? What are the allegations here that this coach was doing?
Well, there was a report that, again, not only our fellow Inside NU editorial staffer Gavin Dorsey shared, but also 670 The Score had a great report about this incident, which is that Foster, really the university conducted an HR investigation about Foster, who, again, as David said, was hired last June. They conducted an investigation, I believe it was before the start of the 2023 season, and they confirmed that Foster made sexist remarks regarding a female staffer, that he made derogatory and abusive remarks to other players and members of the team. There were allegations of racism in multiple instances, and really just a widespread, no matter the sources we talk to, is a culture in which Foster did not want to take accountability for what he was practicing, that the team was doing things in practice that it never tried to implement in games. Sources told us that they would basically flip-flop what types of pitches they would hit in practice compared to the game. And the team went 10-40 and had a decent amount of talent that left in the transfer portal. I mean, Steven Rustich, Alex Calarco going to pretty high-profile Big Ten programs, and Northwestern baseball had multiple alumni get drafted in the MLB draft this year. I mean, Sean Sullivan was on the team last year as a first year, got drafted in the second round by the Rockies. Ethan O'Donnell, Jay Bashirs, and all those guys left as soon as Foster got here because they did not want to be part of the culture. You have to think because they had heard such terrible things. But it's definitely questionable the environment that Foster was allowed to build, and certainly the hiring practices of Derek Gragg, which I'm sure David can talk about more.
Yeah, I was actually about to say, Derek Gragg, the athletic director, did not conduct these interviews. He passed it off to two boosters of the program, the one whose name is on the field at Northwestern, and they decided that Foster was a good representation of the baseball team that they played for in the 1980s. And that's how they made their decision to hire Jim Foster. So Derek Gragg was not involved in the baseball hiring process, it looked like a lot. And there's a lot of questions about Derek Gragg right now. If you're a Northwestern anything reporter fan, nothing about Derek Gragg in these last 96, 108 hours has been positive. We have not heard from him. The media has not heard from him since Friday when he gave us a 2-line statement in the press release of Pat Fitzgerald's 2-week suspension.
The other thing that comes to mind is we know the football program was investigated and partially by there's a law firm involved, but was there any mention of when potentially administration and others in high positions might have heard about some of this? I mean, was there more knowledge of this than people want to admit right now?
If I remember correctly, the HR investigation took place in November of 2022, before the 2023 baseball season even began.
And I'm even talking in terms of the football program.
Yeah, I mean, based on football, we know the university started its investigation in December 2022 after receiving an email from an anonymous address that described these very vivid and disturbing allegations of hazing in the program. And it sounded like the university moved swiftly to hire Maggie Hickey from an external law firm, as you talked about. But the media did not know about this, and really the public did not know about this until ESPN's Rittenberg shared in mid-January that the investigation had started. So it sounded like Northwestern wanted to conceal these claims, that it did not want the public to know that an investigation was happening, at least at the time. And at least any time that we would ask the Northwestern athletics communication staff about the investigation, they always said that they had no further update and that they were basically totally out of the loop about the investigation, that it was in a completely separate process. So I feel like the entire Northwestern community, save for Derek Gragg, President Schill, Fitzgerald, and maybe the team, was blindsided pretty much by this report on Friday that hazing did occur and that Fitzgerald was getting a 2-week suspension.
And wow. I think it's really important to know that Northwestern is a private institution, so they have no legal obligation to release the report. Fridays was bad. When Pat Fitzgerald was terminated on Monday night, President Michael Schill did release parts of the investigation, where that's where we learned that 11 players had came forward and corroborated these hazing accusations, but they're still under the guise of confidentiality. So we have not seen the full report.
Just stunning stuff. Guys, Mike mentioned a moment ago, or he kind of questioned, and I'll question in terms of moving forward in a different way. Look, what's on paper right now is a major project to build a brand new stadium for the Northwestern football team. One would think that's in jeopardy right now, that's kind of sitting on the shelf. And let's be honest, may not be built for quite a while, possibly ever. I mean, am I don't think it's a stretch to say that, right?
No, it's definitely not a stretch to say that. And I think anybody who has paid attention to this situation, and especially the rebuild of Ryan Field, would know 2 facets. Number one, that Fitzgerald was integral in the conversations. The design of the new stadium was basically tailored exactly how he wanted it to be, for it to be a smaller, more intimate setting, but that was modernized. So kind of the fans were closer to the field. And number two, that the stadium had already been very contentious among the Evanston community. A lot of Evanston community members had signed petitions and gone to town hall meetings expressing that they thought it was more than just a football stadium, that it would disrupt their very way of life with lots of noise and concerts that were year round. So when you factor in the element that Fitzgerald is no longer there, and that there's already a lot of pessimism surrounding the program, it's definitely hard to imagine that this project goes on as scheduled. And what we had heard was basically that this was planned to be the last year at the current Ryan Field before Northwestern would have the stadium ready to go in 2026 or so. And I would very much expect for that to be postponed.
Yeah. As of what I know right now, the first vote on it was going to be the zoning to change it for profit to do concerts there. And that was scheduled tentatively for August 9th. So it's coming very quickly. And a group today of Northwestern faculty called for the university to halt their stadium renovation until the program was cleaned up. So I significantly doubt that this vote will go ahead as planned, because right now, if you're an opponent of the stadium, you are having a field day trying to make your claims, and it's much easier than it was before.
Yeah. So what's going to happen here? I kind of, you talk about the stadium, all these things. Are there going to be like players coming back with lawsuits and things like that coming forward?
It's definitely a possibility. If a player feels that they were victimized and they feel that punishment should be taken, they could certainly pursue lawsuits against Fitzgerald, against the assistant staff, against current players, former teammates, anything like that. I would say pretty much nothing is off the table regarding what type of legal action could happen here. And it's just going to depend upon what these players and the people associated with the team in the past have wanted to do. And I'm sure even players who have well graduated could also pursue legal action if they feel it's appropriate.
And on the other end, Pat Fitzgerald did retain a high-end law firm to help with his case because, according to Adam Rimberg, Northwestern did fire him for cause, which would mean they would not have to pay out the rest of his 10-year, roughly $60 million contract. According to reports, Fitzgerald had $42 million still on that contract.
That's almost as big as my contract, Mike.
Holy cow, guys! You that's like a Sturdy Mike contract.
It is. It's crazy.
So it's very much still up in the air what legal actions. But if you're both sides, and I've been thinking about this a lot, if you're Pat Fitzgerald, nothing good can come out of a long discovery period, because the more people find out about what Fitzgerald knew can be bad. And if you're Northwestern, a long discovery period can't be good either, because you'll learn more about what Derek Gregg and Michael Schill knew when they decided to suspend Fitzgerald originally for 2 weeks. So I would expect a settlement outside of court. Probably, I would guess probably around half the contract. My guess it will be a $20 million settlement, and they will part ways.
Are you hearing anything from former players in terms of maybe potentially getting together to put together, a large lawsuit? It seems like, if there were people who feel like they've been victimized in this, that could be a rather large and prickly consequence down the line here.
I can't say that I have heard anything about that, but again, I would not say that it's not possible for that to happen if there are enough former players and they would like to band together. I mean, on the opposite side, there have been a slew of former Northwestern players and coaches, including some very notable ones: Patty Fisher, Greg Newsome, Riley Lease, Jeremy Ebert, that have come out and very strongly supported Fitzgerald, current and former players alike. But I think we could see some pushback more in the opposite direction, especially now that Fitzgerald is gone.
Guys, I got about a minute left here. We could talk with you this entire 2 hours. There's no question about that. This has been one of the best interviews we've done, and we've been privileged to do quite a few. I'd like to hear from both of you just in a few moments. How has this process changed you? What have you learned here in the past week, 8-9 days going through this process?
All right, I guess I'll start. At least for me, I think it's definitely emboldened me a little bit as a journalist, that even though I am a student and was obviously not privy to this information beforehand. And certainly kudos to the Daily Northwestern for breaking it, that even if you're not necessarily the first to break a story, you can still have a significant impact upon it. And also just kind of dealing with a situation that's this traumatic, that's this sensitive, I think is never really something that I had done before in my reporting. So again, very grateful to players that spoke with me and trusted me with their information, and also for the rest of our staff. But I think like a more macro takeaway is that I guess I really can invest all my time in journalism throughout the day and have maybe an hour or two to think. But yeah, it's certainly been a lot, and very appreciative of people like David who have been there and have been encouraging all of the reporting we've done.
Fun student journalism. That's my message. This doesn't happen without the work of the Daily Northwestern, without Inside NU, ESPN, Wildcat Report. This has been so important, but students took the lead. And for a program that is supposed to be ours as students, that we're supposed to go fill Ryan Stadium on Saturdays and enjoy Northwestern football, for the students of the university to say, we don't stand for this and we're going to keep going. Also, a very interesting decision by Northwestern, with the #1 journalism school in the country, to try to sweep this under the rug. Almost like they don't know what they teach us inside their own hallways. So fun student journalism. That's my message for what I've learned throughout this entire time.
Picture you guys at a modern day 21st century mystery machine, and those meddling kids, I almost got away with this. So it's Scooby-Doo needs his snacks, I guess. Always get it. No. On a serious tip, listen, we are so proud of you guys and the hard work that you've done. Congratulations on that. We know there's more to come. Try to be a college student as best you can for these next few weeks, but enjoy the ride, and hopefully we get a chance to talk with you again soon.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks so much, guys, for having both of us on.
Yeah, thank you guys so much.
Great
Absolutely.
job, fellas.
Yeah, great job. Bradley Locker, he's the co-editor in chief of Inside NU. David Gold, he's the managing editor of Inside NU. And again, go read their stuff, insidenu.com. And as we've talked about here, these past almost about 30 minutes here, this isn't over. So, and these guys have done such a phenomenal job. We know they'll be on top of the story for quite some time. They're only juniors, guys. Unbelievable. Hey, stay with us. We've got to take a time out right now. Much more to come after this.